Stand for Truth podcast. I'm your host, Charlie Bakos. Today, I'm proud to present a special guest, former Australian NBA basketball player who spent most of his career playing in the NBA. Standing 7 feet tall, played center, and was selected first overall pick in the 2005 NBA draft by the Milwaukee Bucks. He's also the first Australian to ever be picked number one. He was traded to Golden State Warriors in 2012, where he won an NBA championship with the Warriors in 2015. He's also played for Australia multiple times. Welcome to Stand for Truth, Andrew Bogut.
Big things have been expected ever since the 7-footer became the first Australian to be selected with the number one pick in the 2005 NBA draft.
Bogut blocks the shot, game over! Lob to Bogut, perfectly done.
Dear Oakland, thank you. Thank you for all the love. For making a stranger from Melbourne feel like he was right at home. You were there when everything changed. When the lovable losers became the class of the NBA. It was your toughness, your grit that fueled us. A moxie as authentic as the town itself. You made every game feel like a playoff game. And together, we reached the top of the mountain.
Thanks for having me, man.
Thanks for coming on, man. I know I'm actually in Lebanon recording this, and you're in Brisbane. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So let's start with your early days, Andrew. As a kid, you grew up in Melbourne, yeah?
Yeah, grew up in Melbourne. Yeah, southeast suburbs. Yep.
And your parents were Croatian, both Croatian, or your dad Croatian?
Yeah, both parents migrated in the I think it was the 70s, early 70s. They migrated to Australia from Croatia.
And as a young kid, being in Australia, called a wog and being teased and stuff like that, did you come across that? In Sydney, we got teased a lot. I don't know how it was in Melbourne. How was that with your upbringing? Were you teased as a young kid, being Croatian, being a bit different?
Yeah, of course. I didn't cop it as much as my dad did. My dad really got it really hard. Coming to Australia, the 60s and 70s and even the 80s to an extent, was probably the worst time for kind of racism and all that in Australia. Although today they seem like it seems like it's worse today, but it was really bad back then. And he didn't speak a word of English neither, so that kind of caused a lot of problems for him in school. So much so that he was basically working at, I think, 15 or 16. He left school and went working in hard labor and warehouses and all that kind of stuff. So I got it a little bit, but nowhere near what kind of our parents had to face.
So from what your dad copped in that, was that like a foundation of, I see you today always standing up for the truth, standing up for your beliefs. Was that something that was instilled by your dad, or was that something that you developed over the years?
We're kind of it's kind of a stubborn family to an extent, but we're very, very principled and very, very strong on the truth and what we believe. So there wasn't a whole lot of tolerance for nonsense, and that was kind of that's a lot on the Balkan Croatian community itself. Very fiery people, very passionate, but also very point blank. And I was kind of always taught growing up that if you ask a question, you answer it truthfully. You don't answer a question if you're asked. You don't answer a question giving the answer that you think they want to hear to appease somebody. You give your honest opinion, and it might not always be right. It might not be the acceptable answer at the time or politically correct, but I was always told that if someone asks you something, you give the honest answer.
And regardless of the backlash, yeah?
Yeah, the backlash you got to deal with. I mean, people hate the truth, as we've learned the last 3 or 4 years and probably the last 10 years of my life. Like, people the truth's now become controversial in the society we're living in, and that's a pretty scary time. So I think you need people to continue to tell the truth and try to live principled and respectable lives. But that now is deemed as controversial, which is it's a full 180 from where society was 3 or 4 decades ago.
And I mean, you went from Australia to America, played college basketball, then you got drafted number one in the NBA. The transition from Australia to American culture, how did you find that? And how did you find speaking the truth in America compared to here?
Yeah, look, I went over as I was 18 years old at the time. I went over to University of Utah. So, Salt Lake City is kind of a really family orientated, more of a conservative, or was more of a conservative kind of family orientated
And it's a
state
Mormon
city
city,
in
a
Utah.
Mormon city, yeah.
Yeah, very, very Mormon. People knock. Yeah, it is. Yeah, people knock the Mormons, but I had a lot of respect for them because they're very, very family orientated. Everything's about family. Everything's about being together, and they have their principles that people laugh at. There's all religions. People poke fun at different things, but one thing I really respected about them was that they're a together community, and they break bread together, and they're really, really consistent on family values. So I went there kind of strategically because I didn't want to go to I definitely didn't want to go to an East Coast school just because I'm New York and get lost in the shuffle. And also didn't want to go to a California school and get caught up in partying and getting ahead of myself. So I felt like Utah was the best path for me because I felt like, whenever I got bored, I'd go to the gym and shoot. I'd go to the gym and work out. I'd go do different things, and it limited the distractions. Now, look, if you want to get in trouble and do stupid stuff, you can find that, in Antarctica if you want to, right? Like,
Yeah,
if you
yeah.
really want to look for that stuff, you'll find it. But Utah was very limited with that kind of stuff, and it just kept me focused on what I was there for, which was trying to get to become a professional player.
Did you at any stage think that you were going to get number one pick, or was that just something that came up, you know, over time, or did you expect to, hey, I'm going to be number one?
I didn't. Yeah, I didn't know till late before the draft. My journey was kind of weird. Like I went to the University of Utah. Wasn't really ranked that highly. It was kind of unknown. My last few years in Australia, I kind of started to get better and better, and then my name started getting out there. So I kind of blossomed really, really super late. And then going to Utah my freshman year, I had a pretty decent year, not a crazy year by any means. And then I went to the Olympics between my freshman year, my first year in college, and my second year. And that's when I made my biggest jump. I went to the Olympics, played against grown men, came back for my second year. And then, yeah, month to month for that second season, I started getting higher and higher on draft boards, on projected draft boards. And then, by the time the draft rolled around, I was going to be a top 3 pick. And then, once the draft was rolling around, they said top 2 pick, and then it ended up going number 1. But it just, my journey I wasn't that kid that was like, he's going to be a player from like, 12, 13, 14. Someone said that guy's going to be the NBA. Like, it was literally an 18-month turnaround from college to NBA. And, I'm drafted number 1. So it was
Oh
kind of a
wow!
really quick, unique journey.
All right. So when you were picked number one in the draft, obviously you would have became a household name. Everybody in Australia knew who you were. Everybody in America. Did at any stage you being number one pick in America think to yourself, "Hey, if someone asks me a question, I better not say the truth because I don't want to jeopardize my position"?
Yeah, look, a little bit early on, I learned that lesson the hard way. I got asked a question about, there was this thing with my agent. A lot of kind of scouts were comparing me to big white slow guys because I was white and from overseas. So my agent was like, "You need to push back on that whenever it's public because you're more athletic than that and this and that." And I learned the hard way by someone asked me about comparing myself to Luke Longley and a few other Australian players, and I kind of inadvertently, was probably disrespectful to them in the way I answered the question because I kind of was like, remember my agent telling me distance yourself from being compared to any tall, slow white guy, and I was like, oh, I'm better than Luke Longley. I'm this, I'm that. I can do this, and I was a young 19, 20-year-old kid that had no media training and didn't really understand it. So it's funny now because Luke and I are good friends, but I know Luke wasn't too happy with it about it at the time, as were a lot of other players. But that was my first reality shock into the media and being honest, but not putting the media spin that you're supposed to put on things. Probably would answer that question a lot differently if I was asked it today. But definitely that, and there were early on, I wasn't too in tune with what was going on politically in the world. I was a young kid. Like, I didn't follow politics, hated politics. Whenever I'd see it on TV, I changed the channel. And then, as you grow into a young man, you start to follow a little bit more things, like what appeals to you, what doesn't. And I started slowly commenting on different things and got, pros and cons with that all throughout my career. And it was kind of, you're an athlete, you need to shut up, that kind of thing. But yeah, I definitely learned the hard way. And look, we get media trained. So when I say trained, you look back at it and some of it's useful and some of it's also, they're basically telling you don't answer questions that are to do with politics because it can separate your fan base and all that kind of stuff. Whereas I was kind of like, well, if I'm getting asked a question about a political issue or a social issue, I'm going to answer it. So yeah, to answer your question shortly, definitely felt some pushback and some heat at times from answering questions truthfully on what I thought was right.
That's good to hear, man. I mean, because you don't think about it. You see some celebrities. I know Michael Jordan used to avoid the political questions and stuff, but then you see LeBron James, always getting himself into the political situations. And obviously, during the COVID lockdowns and stuff, where the Black Lives Matter, a lot of the NBA players started wearing, the nicknames on the back of their jerseys and stuff like that. And there was a situation where they were taking the knee, and it was an Orlando player. I don't know, I forgot his name.
Mm-hmm.
He refused to take the. That's right, yeah. So you weren't playing in the NBA at that stage because you had finished, you had retired. What would you have done in those situations? I mean, would you have fallen to what all the other players did, or would you stand in your like Jonathan Isaac? Would you have done what he done? Stand up for what you believe?
Yeah, for me, it would have been blown up even more being an international athlete, being a white athlete. If I had done that, I'd like to think I would have. Based on this, I'm not going to kneel for an anthem. I'm not going to kneel for a country's anthem that gave me everything. That's the way I saw it. I saw it as like I grew up in lower socioeconomic to at times we got to medium, but mainly in between low and medium income earners for my family. Father having his own business and whatnot, so we had good times and bad times. Going from that to going to the NBA, that made me make hundreds of millions of dollars and play the game I love in front of millions of people, see the world, see different cities. I'm not going to poop on that country, right? Like I just didn't feel right, and I was always taught that no matter how much you just like a country, no matter whatever, when you're in that country or you're traveling abroad, you respect those people and that culture. And the first part of that is you stand for their anthem. You don't have to sing along, you don't have to put your hand on your heart, but you stand for that anthem. That's just a mutual sign of respect with countries. So I don't think I would have done it, and it would have been a huge backlash. I'm not gonna buy into a doctrine. As soon as something goes public and mainstream and everyone buys into it, I question it because I'm just like,
yeah. So
everyone's
Jonathan Isaac
following it because the media or the said, yeah.
Yeah, so Jonathan Isaac got scrutinised. Obviously, he's African American, so they couldn't blame him for that, for his colour. So they went down the path of his Christian faith. They started attacking him for his Christian faith. So you probably would have got slaughtered because, like you said, you're not American, you're not African American, and it would have been just even worse for you. But again, you want to stand for the truth, regardless of what it is. Moving forward, you also you got drafted to the. So your video cut out. Yeah, you there? So you got drafted to the Golden State Warriors, 2012.
No, I got drafted to Milwaukee.
So you got traded to the Warriors in 2012.
Yep.
Yeah. Now, when you went to the Warriors, you were playing with Steph Curry, all the big stars, but they weren't big stars at the time, correct? Until a bit later on.
Yeah, Steph had some injuries. Clay just got drafted. Draymond came a year after I got there. So yeah, they weren't definitely weren't the names they were now.
So you stayed with the Golden State Warriors and you end up winning a
Yeah, no worries.
championship. Winning the championship, how did that feel?
Yeah, surreal. You go from the Milwaukee Bucks, who at the time you never really felt we had a chance to win a championship. A goal for us was just to make the playoffs. Like if we made the playoffs, that would have been a great year for us, and then build on that. And get to Golden State. When I first got to Golden State, it was probably worse win-loss wise than Milwaukee was. Like it was a basket case of an organization. No one wanted to stay there. We couldn't sign premier free agents. Then a new ownership group came in, and now it's slowly built into probably the number one, number two destination in the league, right? So to go in that short amount of time and win a championship within 3 years is just crazy. And to know, once you actually break down how many people have a championship ring, how many players have won one, it's 15 players a year, right? Get a championship ring, and generally over the course of a decade, the same team's probably going to win 2 or 3 out of those in a decade. Like the Warriors won 4 in the last decade, right? So that's a real elite group that you're in. You're forever bonded by winning the championship and being part of that journey. And I think it's just very, very lucky to be, just the way the trade went down, how I ended up there, and then go on and win a championship and competing for another one the year after is something I always remember.
It's huge, man. Winning NBA championship, I think second Aussie to do it. That's I watched it. So I grew up watching NBA since I was young. For me, it was phenomenal seeing you win the championship. I was wow. And interviewing you today, it's just it's a blessing, man. You know what? You've been very successful. You've gone from the NBA. You've come back to Australia. You joined the Sydney Kings. You started your own podcast. One thing I want to ask you is you've been very, very, very controversial. A lot of people say, okay, Andrew Bogut, NBA champion, made millions. You've got all the success. You've got all the money. Why would you put yourself in a position where you're going to get scrutinized or slaughtered or smashed on mainstream media? Pretty blunt question.
Yeah, I mean, as soon as someone's labeled controversial, my ears perk up and I want to find out who they are, because what controversial is if you're speaking outside of the narrative that's set by our governments and our media, who are intertwined, especially in Australia and the world for the most part. But that's not a conspiracy theory. Like, you saw that during COVID, all the government messaging was all pumped through the mainstream media in Australia, and they were parroting the exact thing from the script of the government to the people. So that's not controversial because it's approved doctrine, right? But as soon as you go outside of that, like, hey, hang on a second, are these lockdowns going to have a detrimental effect in the next 3 to 5 years or decade for our kids' learning, for mental health, for domestic violence abusers, for child groomers, for all these kind of things? Are they going to have an effect? Are they going to have an effect with kids' sport? I was an athlete as a kid. You take away 2 years of kids' sport. Is that going to have an effect for a kid now that can't go professional, or put aside all the mental health benefits of young kids' sport and what it does for your confidence and all that kind of stuff? Like, is anyone talking about that? So I started talking about that, and it's like, well, it's controversial. Like, why is it controversial? Forcing people to have an injection to go to work. It was just the fact that we were even in that stage of Australia in general and the world was just alarming, and people were cheering it on. People were cheering on their neighbours losing jobs. People were cheering on people being banned from cafes. These were the same people generally that are posting hashtag equality slogans on their social media, and they've got the BLM square and all about let's be human, let's be nice. And then all of a sudden those same people turned on it, and it was just a crazy thing to watch for me. And I was happy speaking out. I was happy talking about it. And once I found out that I'm not supposed to talk about it, I'm one of those guys that's stubborn. It's like, okay, you don't want me to talk about it because it's controversial. I'm going to double down now. I'm going to keep talking about it. And there wasn't a lot of people talking about it. And I know for a fact there were a lot of people in positions of power and celebrities and athletes and coaches that agreed with what I was saying, because I have the DMs to prove it. I have DMs saying, agreeing with what I said, saying, I can't really agree with you publicly because of my job. We're government funded, we're this, we're that. but keep going, man. Like, we need that voice. And I kind of was like, well, we need people like you to stand up as well. But I understood a lot of people were kind of railroaded into, I got to put food on the table for the kids, I lose my job, or I speak up. So they couldn't do that. I'm in a position where, I'm at this point self-employed and made enough earnings throughout my career where I don't need to bow down and be on my knees for somebody. So that's kind of why I started speaking up, and yeah, it caused some backlash, but I didn't really care.
Were you ever asked to promote the lockdowns or promote any of this stuff? Because they obviously approach celebrities. Did they ever approach you?
Yeah, so I did a video. That's kind of when it all went viral. I did a video. I can't remember what year it was because the COVID 3 years, just all a blur. I think it was 21, mid 21. I did a video. So I got an email through kind of a mediator that gets me deals for speaking gigs and all that kind of stuff. And it basically said, hey, would you do a video, basically about the lockdowns, like, stay home, stay safe. It's not too hard, protect your loved ones, all that kind of bullcrap, right? And I got the email script, and I can't remember how much money it was. It wasn't crazy money, but there was a fee attached to it. And I was like, okay, so I'm reading this, and I'm like, look around my house. I'm in a decent house. I'm in a very nice house. I've got a pool outside. I've got a spa. The fridge full of food and drinks. Not a worry in the world. And now I'm going to preach to the masses who are doing it super tough. Like, stay home. It's not that hard. If I can do it, you can do it. I was like, nah, that's hypocritical. I can't do that. I'm not going to do it. And I knew for a fact that I have a lot of friends in the labor industry that run cafes and restaurants that are, on the tools, that are landscapers, and they even got shut down. And I'm like, well, how's a bloke that, mows lawns for a living going to work via Zoom off a laptop and make money? Like, it's not possible, right? So that's when I was like, nah. And then I just I didn't tell anyone about that until later on when this all ramped up. And then we started to hear that there was celebrities and people out there getting money to promote the vaccines and all that kind of stuff. And people think it's conspiracy theory. It's not. It actually happened. And
Yeah.
It doesn't directly come from the government, but the government, they'll put out tenders to PR companies and agencies, and then goes through 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 mediators. So you can't directly link it to them. That's the way they do it. It's been done that way for years. We're seeing it now with the voice vote. We're seeing it now with different things throughout society. Whenever there's agendas that need to be pushed, it goes that way. And I said no. I didn't take the money, and I just kind of that's when things really blew up. That video really blew up because a lot of people were like had thoughts about, are these people getting paid to promote this? The answer is yes.
Didn't the Victorian government actually ask you to take your post down at one stage? Like, you're posting stuff online?
That was to do with, I did it. Yeah, there was I think it's Voice for Victoria, or Voice of Victoria did just a parody of the Victorian Government COVID ads. They have that chime at the start of their ads. This is the Victorian Government, do this, do that. They did a spoof video of that using the same chime, right? And I thought it was hilarious. It was just pointing out Premier Daniel Andrews' corruption, and one of the most corrupt premiers I've seen in my lifetime. And I've lived in the US, I've lived in Croatia for a number of months, and I've lived in numerous states in Australia. Probably one of the most corrupt, premiers we've ever had, in my opinion. And it was an ad about that. So I just reposted it on my page because I thought it was funny. And I got a letter from the VEC, which is the Electoral Commission, citing that I needed to put out a declaration. So a declaration is when you watch these political ads and it says brought to you by blah, blah, blah from Canberra, ACT, zip code, whatever, right? They wanted me to put that on, a declaration. And I'm like, hang on a second, I'm not a politician. I'm not running for any office. I have not promoted any political parties ever. I have not promoted any political parties. Look, there's political parties I like and I hate, but I've never gone on record saying, hey, everyone vote for this. So I was like, what? Like, this is crazy. You're threatening me with like a fine or whatever. So I posted it online. It got a lot of backlash. A lot of people then saw, okay, like this is deeper than just, they're going after people who are voicing concerns against the government or all that kind of stuff. And that was kind of, I've received numerous other letters and threats since then as well about different things. And I just laugh them off because, if you want to threaten me, take me to court. I'll fight for that every day of the week. And They didn't follow up from that, especially once I posted it online. They just kind of made out like, oh, no one's above the law. Andrew Bogut's not above the law. It's like, well, I'm not a politician. And what was funny about it was there was a link at the end of that video that went to a third-party website from the people who made the video that actually had a declaration on it, funnily enough. So once they realised all that, it kind of got squashed. But that was the lengths the Victorian government was going to. Now, the VEC is supposed to be independent of the government. They're supposed to oversee fair and honest elections. I don't hold that view at all.
Wow, man! So you got the government, you got all these people going after you. Obviously, I get a lot of attacks too online. So you got a lot of keyboard warriors. Do you get a lot of threats from keyboard warriors? Because I know for a fact that I've never actually had someone physically face to face saying anything to me, but online there are heaps of keyboard warriors threatening and stuff. So I know there's a lot of bots out there, fake accounts and stuff. Do you get that a lot as well, or?
Yeah, I had this conversation with someone not long ago, and it's quite funny because when I'm out in the community, I've only had one interaction at a basketball game where a guy was being a bit of getting back and forth with me, but he was on the drink, right? So just being a bit of a smart aleck. And when I'm out in public, the reception is awesome. Like people come up to me and say thank you. I'm not making this up. Every day I go out, someone will come up to me and say thank you for your voice during COVID. I lost my job because of XYZ, or my family member, ended up in hospital or was suicidal, or I know someone that died. Like, a restaurant I used to frequent in Melbourne, I went back there and the restaurant was gone. I was like, what's going on? I spoke to the neighboring shop and they're like, yeah, the owner hung himself during COVID. I'm like, what? Like, wow. You know what I mean? And no one spoke about any of that. Everyone was like, oh, no, it's just a myth. So yeah, in the community, the people are awesome. Online, like you said, I think it's a handful of people with 1,000 accounts. I honestly do. And look, people will say, "Oh, people aren't going to approach you, Andrew, in public because you're a big dude. You can be intimidating." But I'm all for having a debate. And if people come up to me and say, "Hey, I don't agree with you on X, Y, Z," I'm happy to have a chat. I'm not going to threaten you or try to be physically violent, but let's have a conversation. I think we need to have these conversations with different opinions, which you don't get on mainstream media or don't get in public. But yeah, I'd agree with you. Out in public, it's a whole different reception. But these people online that can hide behind anonymous profiles, they're very, 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 very tough.
Man, I'm very inspired by what you're saying because I'm out there. I'm speaking truth all the time. I'm getting hammered in DMs by people, but obviously in public I'm not. But seeing someone like you, who's a celebrity, who's played in the NBA, who's world famous, standing up for truth, is phenomenal because there's not many out there that are. And the thing is, that's crazy, is a lot of people watching this need to see this because what you said before, where people go, oh, yeah, Andrew, I agree with you, but I can't put my name to it or I can't stand with you or whatever because it's going to jeopardize my work or whatever. People have to understand, and that's what they want. They want everyone to think like that. So we need more people like yourself standing up. I mean, you're a celebrity. You've got your money. You've got your fame. You've got everything. You're not doing this for fame. Like people have to understand that you can't do this on your own. I can't do this on my own. We all need to stand together and stand for the truth. That's really what it boils down to, don't you think, Andrew?
Yeah, no doubt. And look, to your point on that, there's a lot of people that say that I'm doing this for attention. It's like it's doing this for me, for business interests, and if I was financially driven, would be a net loss. Like there's no real net gain financially for me to have this voice. So it's just like these idiots that say, "Oh, you're doing this because you want attention." Like, no, like this actually hurts me to an extent within the public sphere of speaking gigs and sponsorship deals and marketing deals and media deals, because people are like, ooh, like you said, controversial. Do we really want to work with him? But like most people that have worked with me don't really have anything bad to say. I do what I'm contracted to do as best as I can. I'm engaging with people when I work with them. So yeah, look, I think the other thing is, as you said, we need more people to speak up. We do, but I understand why they don't. When you look at, in Australia especially, how entrenched the government is with our everyday lives. And by that, I mean people's businesses, right? So if you run a small business, there's so many small businesses that are dependent on governments, whether it be through grants, whether it be through concessions, whether it be through funding, whether it be through blah, 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 suppliers, whatever, right? So they know If I come out and speak out against this government, I might lose my government contract. I might lose the grants that I'm getting. I might lose a concession. I might lose blah, 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 right? So there's a lot of people that are affected, and there's a lot of people then in the corporate world who are, really entrenched with government deals and contracts. And you might be a contractor for, doing the asphalt on freeways, right? That are all government contracts. So I understand why, but what I say to those people is you got to think about your kids and your grandkids. Like, do you want them living? If it's this bad right now in 2023, and we just let it, we just be blind to the fact of what's going on because, I get my money, I just need to keep quiet. What's it going to be like in 10, 15, 20, 30 years? Like, you're building wealth. Generally, adults are building wealth for their children and their grandchildren one day to live a good life. Well, they might have that wealth in 50 years, but for what? Like, we're going to be, we're morphing into a communist socialist nation with the way things are going. So that's why, I heavily push back about all that. And I just don't think having the government involved in everyone's lives to the extent it is a good thing. And we see why it isn't, because they can really put the thumb on your forehead without you even knowing it.
Yeah, 100%. I noticed that you really support the Leave Our Kids Alone posts. You post about it all the time. I also saw, I think at the beginning of the year, your 6-year-old kid went to a soccer game and the form they had to fill in had 4 genders. Is that correct? Was that something that happened?
All of them now, man. It's all. I was doing one this morning for another sport, and it's just rife. And they'll, the activists will hide behind, it's just the uniform form that they have. It's like, it's not. Like, clearly there's an agenda going on here. And my whole thing is just leave kids alone, man. Like, if you're an adult and you want to go and do whatever you want to do, go and do it. I don't care. I don't want to know about it. I don't care about it. I'm not going to stop you doing it. I'm not going to discriminate against you because of your sexuality. If I see you out in public or interact with you, I don't. It doesn't bother me. But I don't think we should be promoting, all this kind of stuff to children. And I would say that's the same as if it was a heterosexual couple. Like, I don't need parades and floats going down a street with semi-naked women and men doing provocative dances for children to see that. It's like, why? Like, and people will say, it's homophobic. I say the same thing. Like, if a lady came to, my child's school and did a provocative dance, I'd be firing up the same way. It's not, there's a time for that when they're adults and they're consenting and they understand they've been, on this earth long enough to figure out their devices and what they want to do. But it's just been pushed in our face so much. And I just don't buy into it. If you want to call me names because of it, go for it. I don't discriminate against anybody, race, religion, sexuality, creed. Where I draw the line is when you're recruiting, preaching, or shoving it down people's throats. I got a problem with that. I think, like, live and let live. That's my motto. But I think we've gone way past that, especially with the rainbow stuff now. I know in Sydney I saw
the mural
on
Winged
artwork, the angel wings. And look, I'm not overly religious, but that's blatantly disrespectful to people's religions. And there's a lot of people that are religion and very touchy about that, the same way the rainbow people are touchy about. So they're doing the exact same thing that they're generally protesting about. We want equal rights, we want this. Well, you're doing the same thing to other groups now. So I don't respect those groups. It's become very political. People are scared to now speak out against that with the guise of being something phobic or this or that, where I think common sense is needed. And I think it is, people are starting to wake up to that now, where it's becoming too much. We've got kids at, 6, 7 years old being told they're the wrong gender. I mean, that's just absolute insanity to me. I was a child that put my mum's high heels on at 5 years old. You know why? Because every morning I woke up, my mum got ready for work. I saw her doing that. I love my mother, and I was like, I want to be like my mum. So I put on. These days they would have said I was a girl. They would have called me Andrea and tried to transition me and put me on testosterone blockers and like, what are we doing? And that's, I've got a huge issue with that. And that crosses over into sport now. Males are now going to play female sport because they feel like a woman on that day. Like, it's just, once you give a little bit of that inch, it's full blown, and we're starting to see that now. And I don't know what the future looks like as far as that goes.
You spoke out about that trans basketballers or something like that, and I saw Andrew Gaze went up against you. Like, I don't get that.
Well, Andrew Gaze, you understand. Andrew Gaze works in Melbourne. He's in the epicenter of those kind of views, where you have to have those views to be in the media, and he's entitled to his view. I truly don't believe. I don't think truly he believes what he's saying. I don't. He's got daughters, albeit his daughters are older now. But I can't see that if his daughter was 11 years old playing against a full, a 12-year-old, nice, stocky, burly guy, got her nose broken. Like I'm hearing a lot of female athletes are messaging me that playing NRLW, AFLW, all these leagues that have seen carnage on a field or a court from a male that's now playing in a female league. He wouldn't have the same opinion in my opinion, right?
Yeah.
I think once you experience that, and we talk about sport and how important it is for young boys and girls, not just for being a professional, but just what it teaches you about teamwork and sacrifice and putting in work during the week so you get better for that weekend game. Now you're taking that away from a lot of female athletes that don't want to play against men. There's a female league for a reason, and I spoke out about that because Basketball Victoria were trying to hide it and just sweep it under the rug and have a male play in the female league that no one knew about till the last minute, hoping that once it's in, it's too late now. So I heard about it and posted about it, and it blew up, and that athlete in question was deemed ineligible to play. But there will be a next one and a next one. And from what I've heard from them, the mail that I've got from a lot of people is a lot of the minor leagues don't have rules for it, so you can do it. So a lot of the minor leagues have, males that are playing in female leagues and actually destroying the league. I think New South Wales, one of the female soccer leagues, the top goal scorer is someone that was born a male that's now thinking they're female, top scorer in the league. And the league actually hides their name. So when you click on the league top goal scorers, it just says player one. Doesn't put their name because they know that's telling me that they know what they're doing is wrong. They don't put the person's
100%.
name because they're trying to hide it. They're and that's what I have a problem with. And there's a lot of people out there that agree with what I'm saying, that are scared. Oh, I'm going to get called something phobic. Well, I'd rather be called something phobic than I protect the sanctity of sport for young boys and girls, right?
100%. And it's also going against women. It's actually ruining all women's sport. It's sad. It's very sad. I mean, you mentioned Andrew Gaze being in Melbourne. You were born and bred in Melbourne, and you lived in Melbourne. You're out of Melbourne now. Is this one of the reasons why you're out of Melbourne, or?
There's a number of things. I loved growing up in Melbourne. I've just seen a lot of changes. I think the city's probably too big for what I like. I've lived all around the world, and I really value not sitting in my car for 2 or 3 hours a day. I think that's something that I just didn't want to do. You go on a kid's sport and school, and then, you're just in your car nonstop, so much traffic, so much people. And then what I saw during COVID was alarming. I just, didn't want to. I don't want to live in a place like that. I don't want to live in a place where, I was there for the second long lockdown, and just seeing how much vitriol was in. People were just abusive, and where's your mask, and where's this, why are you doing this? And you're just like, whoa, like, calm down, you know what I mean? And I had a mate that when they had that exercise, 1 hour exercise a day in Victoria. I don't think you had that in New South Wales.
Yeah, we did.
1 hour exercise.
We did.
Yeah. So I had a mate that I won't name who it is, but he had a husky Malamute dog, right? Big dog, and he just had a newborn baby. So he wanted to take the baby out, and he's like, "Shit, I can't take." Oh, sorry, I swore. Crap, I can't take the baby and the dog because the dog pulls. I've got a pram, I'm going this way, and the pram's going that way. So he left the wife, took the baby for a stroll, came back, swapped, took the dog. Neighbor comes out and goes, "You've had your 1 hour exercise today." Just like, my mate's like, about to abuse her, like, all right, like, just go back in your house. But that's how bad it was. Like, you're walking in open space by yourself, right? And people couldn't logically realize, like, oh, you've had your 1 hour, you're now contributing to the virus. Like, are you serious? Are you not walking in an open field at an oval? So that's, why I kind of, was just like, nah, I don't think I can live amongst people like this that are that indoctrinated by their government. Just can't do it.
we had a similar situation. I was in Lebanon during the lockdown for 11 months, got married. Then me and my wife came back to Sydney, and I hadn't moved out of my parents' house yet. So what happened was the first day after you had to do the 2 weeks lockdown in a hotel. So before I moved into my apartment, me and my wife stayed at my parents' house for a week because you had to transition to move. And my license is obviously at my parents' house. The neighbors hadn't seen me for 12 months, so they didn't know that I lived there. Man, there was a $5,000 fine, and like they'd call the police, and you get a $5,000 fine if you moved out of your house. Cops were called to my parents' house 3 times, knocking on my door, questioning why is there a car in the driveway, who's this guy? So I had to show them my license and prove that I lived in the address. I'm thinking neighbors were going out knowing that my elderly parents were going to get a $5,000 fine. Thank God they didn't, but people were just being brainwashed, and it was crazy. The thing is, you said you lived in Melbourne. You were talking about being the epicenter of all this stuff. Man, you were in Golden State, San Francisco, which is probably Melbourne on steroids, right? 2015. But from 2015 till now, how much has it changed?
I think California's in big trouble. Well, I don't think I know. It's I have a lot of friends that are, not just athletes, but people that are high net worth individuals, medium net worth, or even some people that were lower net worth. They're all trying to get out. It's become, I call Victoria California without the sun in Australia. Very, very similar with the way they go about things, the ideology, there's always a protest, there's governments just got their nose in everything. And California is one of the most beautiful places in the world. Like what they have there, you can drive, to Tahoe and go skiing, and you can drive down to one of the best breaks to surf, just south of San Francisco, and you can go up to Napa for a while. They've got one of the best places in the world, and it's just ruled by government. It's just taxes sky high. They put in a bunch of different legislation constantly that's just contributing to different things. Their homelessness is just next level. I've got a few investments in San Francisco that aren't doing well, that are in downtown San Francisco, because they can't even find tenants for commercial properties right now, period. People are just getting out of the city. It's not safe. Homeless everywhere. We were based in Oakland when I was in Golden State. They hadn't moved to San Fran yet. Oakland's just as rough, but we were kind of in the East Bay, and I love the East Bay. So we were kind of we weren't near the city where I lived, which was really, really nice. But yeah, just a prime example of what governments can do to beautiful places, and people are now leaving there and going to Texas or Florida that have any kind of money. It's not a great place to do business. It's not a great place to open a corporation or a company. There's all these taxes and different things that they're just imposing on people that are doing well. So those people are like, okay, I'm going to do well in another state where they actually want me to do well. So it's quite a shame, and I can't say I'm surprised. It's all government driven there.
And I mean, obviously Hollywood being in California, gone downhill as well. But I mean, even now there's that new Mel Gibson movie with Jim Caviezel, Sound of Freedom. Have you seen it or heard much about it?
No, I'm waiting to see it. I'm just, it's an issue. Like people don't understand. Like my wife and I are really, not a great way to live, but we're really vigilant of our children, especially when we're out in public, when we send them to, your holiday camps and all that. One of us will be there the whole day. Like we're not leaving them by themselves. Not at this age, they're 5 and 6. So this is a huge issue in society that people don't want to talk about. And there's a lot of predators and sketchy people out there when it comes to kids. And this movie, I guess, is exposing a lot of that. I find it funny because there's been some people in the media that have pushed back on the movie, saying it's conspiracy theory and it's QAnon cults and all that kind of stuff. That tells you all you need to know. Those people that are writing those articles, they should be put on a list as of today, because this movie we should all be against this. Like, it doesn't matter whether you're left, you're right, you're pro this, you're pro that, you're this religion, you're that religion, you're anti this.
Everybody should be against it.
the sexualization of children, grooming, child trafficking. Everyone should be against that. This isn't a political thing. This is almost being branded like it's conspiracy, or it's this political party. No, we should all come together and be like, this is not right. We should not stand in this in any society. And that's the one thing we don't do very well in the Western world. We just get swept under the rug and say, oh yeah, or whatever. And you look at, even in Australia, you look at what convicted pedophiles and offenders are getting jail time. It's not good enough. Like it's really not good enough. Like if you did something to someone's child and that father then killed the pedophile, they'd get more time than the pedophile did for doing something to their kid, which is wrong in my opinion. And I think that's something that really bothers me in the Western world, and that's why we really try to keep an eye on our kids.
And everyone needs to listen to that message and really stand for defending our children. And one last question, maybe a message to the audience watching, Andrew. What would be a suggestion for parents, for example, defending their children or standing up for the truth? What would be a suggestion for you for people who say, hey, my child goes to a Catholic school, but they're teaching him this stuff that's against the faith, but they're sexualizing the children. But I don't want to stand up because they might scrutinize my child, or I might get attacked by other parents. I mean, you got your head on a chopping board. You're on social media. You're in the mainstream media. Everyone's attacking you. Okay, what would be the message for these parents? What would you say to them?
Well, I would say, as I've experienced, there's a lot of people that have the same thought process as them that are too scared to say it. So what you need to do is you need to talk to other parents, get their opinion on things. And every now and then you'll have someone that's completely drinking from the fountain and loves everything the school's doing, which whatever. But you can get enough parents to go and actually voice some concerns. But if you're doing it by yourself, that's how they want to break down these kind of things. If you leave it to the individual, it's very hard to do. If you get a few people that think the same thing, you can make some noise, but you got to voice it. Like I do. I keep a real close eye on what's coming through our kids' curriculum, what's coming through our kids, what they bring home. I make an effort of actually going to my kids' classroom when I pick them up and seeing what's on the walls. People will say I'm crazy, but I walk in, say hello to the teacher. Teacher loves it. If you've got a teacher that doesn't allow you in the classroom, you've got some concerns, right? Now it's a bit harder to do when they're in their teenage years, I understand, but go pick them up one day from school. Show up 5 minutes before they're supposed to get out of their classroom, wait outside the classroom, make up an excuse like you want to see the teacher for a second and just see what's on the walls. You start seeing all this stuff we're seeing in the mainstream media and all this political stuff, then you can start asking some questions. So that would be my first thing. Look, I mean, a lot of people probably can't afford to have their kids, change schools and this and that. And in Australia, it's very hard, not very hard, but it's hard to homeschool. There's a lot of legislation around it and a lot of boxes you got to tick. But I know a few people that have ripped their kids out of school completely and just gone to the homeschool system. I have a friend in the US that started a micro school. He actually hired a teacher independently and had a group of 6 or 7 kids that there's teaching our teachers. So there's ways to do things. Like in Australia, there's a lot of box ticking and paperwork you got to do it. So there is extremes you can go to if you are not comfortable with your kid's school. But I think the number one thing is pay attention. That's my parents didn't really pay attention to our school, and thankfully I didn't have any of this stuff shoved down my throat as a young fella. But the school could have done it. My parents would have had no idea, and that's not a knock on my parents. My parents worked 8 till 6 every day. Then there was come home, eat dinner, get ready for the next day, or kids sport, get ready for the next day. So parents aren't really paying attention. You got to pay attention to what your kid's doing. The parents that struggle a lot of times, unfortunately, are the migrants because they're working so hard. English isn't the first language. They can't understand what's being brought home. And a lot of the government schools can just put whatever they want. So you got to make sure you pay attention and read this stuff, and talk to other parents would be probably my first 2 things that I'd go before I consider moving my kids from school.
Thanks for those tips, Andrew. And thank you for joining us, Andrew. And God bless you all for watching. Please subscribe to Stand for Truth podcast. Share this video. And also I'll send you a link you can join Andrew's podcast, Rogues Bogues podcast. So join that. God bless you all. We'll see you next time.